This is April. How may I help you?
Hi, April. My name is Susan Wilkerson. My husband is missing.
Okay.
And it's been about 3 hours, and I have some indication that he must have planned not to be found. He's left his phone. He changed his clothes into I don't know what.
Yeah, you just heard that. There's some indication that he must have planned not to be found. That's what's said in this newly released audio clip from retired Air Force Major General William Neil McCasland's wife after he vanished without leaving a trace, leaving behind widespread speculation about what could have happened. And why is this speculation? Because of retired Major General's potential background in classified information. He oversaw classified space weapons programs. He was the head of research at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, a major attraction for those who follow UFOs, with theories that the base houses extraterrestrial proof in a restricted area known as Hangar 18, or the Blue Room. Now, his wife posting online that she wanted to clear up misconceptions about her husband, insisting that he does not have any special knowledge on the subject of aliens. He was once hacked by the Russians, with NewsNation's Ross Coulthard tracking down public records showing that he was part of an email thread saying UAP and alien files could have been released by now.
He was involved in abortive attempts prior to the Hillary Clinton-Donald Trump election campaign in 2016 to negotiate with John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, about, believe it or not, UAP transparency. There was a discussion underway in which General McCasland was involved. It's a matter of public record now that his emails were part of emails being circulated where it was being discussed that Hillary Clinton, as president, would be making a disclosure about UAPs.
And for more, we are joined by Jennifer Coffindaffer, former FBI special agent and NewsNation Law and Justice contributor. Jennifer, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us on this case.
Great to see you, Natasha.
I want to hear your thoughts on the situation. There are so many theories out there. There's so much speculation because of his background in classified information, because he was hacked by the Russians before. What are your initial thoughts on this case?
Well, when you look at this case, I like to look at the facts. And the facts are that when he departed, he left without his glasses. These were prescription glasses that he wore every day, every video, every photograph, we see him in these glasses. He also left behind his cellular device and his tracking device, in other words, his GPS watch. But what did he take with him, Natasha? He took a .38 caliber gun and he took his identification. He knew these hills inside and out. When I look at that, his age and also some of the physical situation he was dealing with, I truly believe he left in this situation not to be found again.
You know, since he vanished, people have focused a lot on any potential UAP history. We hear his wife disputing, saying that he doesn't have any special knowledge on UFOs, that any information he even does have would be old at this point. Let's take a quick moment to listen. This is NewsNation's Ross Coulthard saying that there should be concern. Let's listen.
Well, certainly his wife made the point that there's been no change in his security clearance since 2013. But what that obscures is that since he left the service of the US Air Force, he's been working with a private military contractor that has been directly involved in particle beam technology research. It's very common for people like the general, very senior military officers with extensive knowledge from their military service, to go into private service. And he's been very heavily involved in secret programs that are part of special access programs with the US and intelligence departments, which frankly are still ongoing.
He went missing after President Trump said he would release government files on aliens and UFOs. Is there any reason why a person who perhaps has classified information would be under any sort of threat if that information will soon be made public?
I don't believe so at all, Natasha. It's been 13 years, and while I understand he does hold a position in private industry that intersects in some ways with the intelligence community, but nevertheless, no one took him, I do not believe, based on the facts and circumstances we know. He left seemingly completely on his own accord. As I said, he took his a gun with him. He didn't take his glasses, and I think that that was because he knew he would not need them.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Does your mind go to foul play here, or do you believe that he left under his own free will and volition?
I think under his free will and volition, he was struggling. If you listen to the end of that call, his wife specifically says he was struggling with issues with his health that were very serious. And he said, and this is a quote from her, that he didn't want to go on living with those types of conditions if they continued. And I think that that is very important takeaway, at least for me.
Why do you think that investigators are not clearly looking into that at this point? They're saying that at this point everything is on the table, and they have not flagged that this is likely the sad end that you're describing.
You know, I think it's very important that they keep an open mind to any possibility, but you can look at even their measures that they're taking, Natasha, these search measures, the dogs, the drones, and so forth in the Sandia Hills that he liked to hike at. He was a prolific hiker. And when you look at all of that, it turns toward them looking for him to be found in those areas. And I think he will, Natasha.
Jennifer Coffindaffer, always appreciate the insight and time. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.